Every city councilor has to fill this out, and you do it online. It used to be paper form, but now it's all online. And I believe you get a reminder email from OGEC, right?
I haven't set Kevin and Alonzo's up yet, but I will here in the near future, and you'll get an invite token. And you go in and you take that invite token and create an account.
Just another password to remember. So you have to fill it out every year.
It's
That's what I wanted.
That's right. Great, yeah. So please don't, please stay. I hope I'm not scaring you all away. It's pretty painless, depending on your business associations and things like that. It can be a little bit more work, but it used to be really painful. They've made it a lot easier over the years. Yeah, it used to be. We used to lose volunteers because of this form in the past. Yeah, we had planning commissioners quit over this in the past. That's in the long past. Now it's fine. So, ethics. The next part of my presentation is to talk about 3 rules, and that's what I want to leave you with tonight. Is just remembering these 3 rules, and those 3 rules are on that little red thing I passed out, a little card. And again, these are 3 things to keep in mind as you go about your daily life as a city councilor and as a private individual that you should keep in mind. And if one of these things comes up, just to put the brakes on and to ask Roberta, ask Michelle, ask me. I think I have an issue. Help me through it. That's why we're all here, is to help you through it. And these 3 questions just help you raise that red flag. These rules are for public officials. You are all public officials. Michelle is a public official. Roberta is a public official because they're employees. Volunteers are also public officials. So at the fire department has some paid staff, but they also have a lot of volunteers. So a volunteer firefighter is a public official. Rule number 1.
And committee members.
And committee, yep. Yep. Don't use your position for personal gain. Very easy rule. The next slide. So this is the but-for test. So and the rule is, a public official cannot use their position to get money or to avoid losing money for the public official or a relative if that opportunity would not be available but for your position. So there's the but for. So what does that mean? What's an example? Well, I would argue you have access to City Hall. You have access to the conference room downstairs. You have access to the copy machine, the copy room, because you're a city councilor. So you can walk into City Hall, say hi to the front desk, and walk in. If you decide to start holding meetings for your business in the conference room, say meeting a client, maybe you're selling a house and you don't have another place to meet, you say, hey, well, no one else is using it. I'm not putting anyone out. It's not costing the city any money. I'm just gonna go use the conference room. So you meet in the conference room. No money lost to the city. Well, it was a financial benefit to you because you didn't have to rent space somewhere else. And the only reason you could use it was because you were a city councilor. Because the person at the front desk saw you coming and waved you in. So, but for your position as a city councilor, you wouldn't get to use that room. Because that's not a room open to the public. So that's a very basic example. There are many others. One I often use is a public works director in a central Oregon county stored his RV in the public works yard. It was a huge public works yard, lots of space. The RV wasn't in anyone's way, but it was behind a fence, and he would have otherwise had to pay a storage unit to store his RV, but you got to put it on the public works yard for free. So, and he was only able to get through the fence because he had the key as the public works director. So that was a private benefit to him, and a violation. Now I'm gonna skip over a lot of the exceptions to these rules, because these were all drafted by the state legislature. And as you might imagine, a lot of the exceptions only apply to state legislators. Go figure. So us as little city councilors, we don't get to use these exceptions too often. But you know, I've included them just because it's fun to have them in there. But a lot of these things don't often apply to you. This doesn't apply to reimbursement. So if you go to the LOC meeting in Salem and you get reimbursed for mileage, you only get reimbursed for mileage because you're a city councilor. Oh no, that's a but-for problem. No, because there's an exception. You can get reimbursed for mileage because you're doing city business. Now you also notice that these rules apply, this first rule and the others apply to you as a public official and to your relatives. So that's important. So, and a relative is of course a defined term, and it means the folks you might suspect and maybe some you might not. So it means your spouse, it means your children, it means your brother, it means your stepbrother, your sister and stepsister, your parents, son-in-law, and then anyone who you have a legal support obligation. That can be through a divorce, step siblings, you know, also if you have a legal obligation to support someone's well-being, then they're a relative. It can be any number of folks. So it's the sphere around you in terms of public official and ethics just got a little bigger. So now you kind of have to think about your spouse and your kids a little bit, and make sure they're not using City Hall, not using, you know, City Hall copier for a fundraiser. Maybe your spouse is running at the school.
Never noticed this before, but it says, or provides employment benefits on employees. A relative.
I believe so.
That's interesting.
So as a private business though.
Okay, I get it. I just never noticed it.
Or is it like if you get insurance under someone, the employment benefits roll over?
I know that it's that. So yeah, I don't know the answer. I'll follow up on that.
Because it doesn't seem like an employer would be a relative.
Employee.
Yeah.
Or an employee would be a relative.
You're talking like something like a yard service? I mean, that's kind of the definition of what I would call an employee, if I were thinking of myself.
It's a contract, right? It would be if you're a business owner, I think.
Okay.
But
And you said go down to City Hall and use their fax machine.
Yeah. Question. Rule number 2, gifts. Gifts are limited to $50 per year per giver. All right, that's the rule. Now let's go through it. What is a gift? A gift is something of economic value given to you, the public official, or the public official's a relative, or a member of your household, without receiving value back, so it was gratis, not given to the general public on the same terms. So that is the definition of gift. And now what is the gift rule? It means the gift rule is you or your relative cannot ask for, receive, or give, or even hint at giving or receiving gifts over $50 from any single source in 1 year if, now this is the big if your source has an interest in your official actions. And for you as a city council, that means your vote, your decision. So the example there would be, say you are hearing a land use appeal, and the developer is the appellant in that case. They have a land use application before the city, they're building a new building in town, and it got appealed, and now it's before the city council to resolve the appeal. That developer has an interest in your decision. So don't go accepting gifts from that developer. There are a lot of folks in town, a lot of people you meet that don't have an interest in your decision. Although, as a city councilor, maybe more than you might initially suspect, for committee members and planning commissioners, the sphere gets smaller and smaller. But for city councilors, it could be a pretty big sphere. But it's folks who have interest in a decision that you're gonna make. Not a general citywide decision, not a staff decision. So if it's something before Michelle, if it's something she's gotta make a decision about, that's not your decision, so that's not your problem. It's her problem. She has gift rules too, but it's not yours. This is a slide I'm gonna skip because this is the exceptions that are largely from the legislature. So campaign contributions aren't gifts. There's customary private business practices that's for all the doctors in the legislature who used to get free gifts from pharmaceutical companies. I know a pharmaceutical company has interest in the legislature. If you were a doctor in the legislature, you got a lot of free stuff from pharmaceutical companies, and they didn't want those to be a problem, so they enacted an exception for that. All right. Not stuff we have to worry about. Rule number 3, confront your conflicts of interest. So the conflicts of interest analysis is the distinction between an actual conflict and a potential conflict. An actual conflict is something will happen. A potential conflict is something could happen, or would happen, or could happen, sorry. So will happen, could happen. So if you have an action, decision, or recommendation by the public official resulting in financial benefit or detriment to you. So this is if you're trying to make money or if you're trying to lose money, I guess. If you're unethical, but bad at it, you'll still get penalized. You have an actual conflict if that decision would result in financial benefit for you or detriment for you or a relative or a business with which you are associated. And a potential conflict is if it could result in financial benefit to you. So if you have a decision before you that would benefit you financially, that would benefit your relative, that's an actual conflict. If you have a decision before you that could benefit you, we don't know, could, then that's a potential conflict. So the example, let's talk about 2 different decisions. So the city is selling some real property. So you have a parcel of property in town, and it's the city's council decision to put it on the market and sell it. It's surplus. So the first decision is to declare it surplus. So you as a body are going to vote and make a decision on whether to surplus this piece of property. Well, you know your spouse is a real estate agent and likes to buy these types of properties. So there is a possibility that a relative of yours would be interested in that piece of property. And there could be some financial benefit there, or maybe even detriment if they made a bad decision. So that is a potential conflict of interest. Now, decision number 2 is you surplused it, and now you have some bidders. And now you have a group of people who actually want to buy the property. And one of those people is your spouse. So whether you vote in favor of your spouse to sell it to your spouse, or if you vote in favor of someone else to not sell it to your spouse, that would be a financial benefit or detriment to your spouse. So that is a would, that is an actual conflict. So what you do? I'm gonna skip a couple slides there, business issues. If you have a business that you're associated with, talk to Michelle and we'll solve the issue. When in doubt, shout it out. So, if you have an actual or a potential conflict of interest, you need to tell folks. You need to tell folks at the meeting when it comes out. So if it's on the agenda, you see that surplus property issue come up before the council, it's on the agenda. Before you start discussing that item, you wanna raise your hand and the mayor will call on you and you will say, I need to declare a potential conflict of interest. You need to say that every time that comes up on successive agendas. So if that's an issue that comes up on day 1 and then on day 10, we're gonna declare that potential conflict of interest on both days, at both meetings.
Does it not have to be clearly defined what the potential conflict or actual conflict is?
Absolutely, yes. And so the law says that you have to declare the nature of the conflict. And you know, I get into squabbles with counselors who wanna be cute and just say, well, I'm declaring a conflict, and then they'll sit on their hands. Well, what conflict? You need to tell us about it. You need to tell the nature of it. So you would say, I know we're talking about a real estate transaction tonight, and you all know that my wife is a realtor, and she likes to buy and sell these types of properties, and she has been looking at this and might consider bidding on it. So I don't know if she will or not. I don't even know if we're gonna declare it surplus or not. I don't know if we're gonna sell it or not. But it could happen, and she could bid on it, so it's a could. So I'm declaring a potential conflict of interest. And you wanna do it on the record, and you wanna do it each meeting that the issue is discussed. You guys record it, so it's gonna be on the record, but this is good to be nice, friendly with Roberta, make sure she puts it in the minutes, that Attorney Williamson, declared a potential conflict of interest. Now, if it's an actual conflict of interest, then you want to do that same thing. You want to declare it, declare the nature, and then you can't participate. You have to shut up. So for a potential conflict of interest, you can participate. You just need to declare it. So I have a potential conflict of interest. My wife is interested in that property. She might want to buy it. But then I can vote. I can discuss, I can participate, and all of that. But now, once it's surplus, and now that we have the bidders in front of us, and we're choosing between my wife and someone else, now I need to declare a potential conflict of interest, and I need to not participate. Now, I've seen a lot of counselors actually get up from the dais and go into the audience, so there's no there's no signs of anything. I don't think that's necessary. And in fact, sometimes that can be a little weird because maybe you're making eye contact with your fellow city councilors. I don't know. Squirrely things have happened. But so it's just don't participate in the discussion. Now there are, of course, some legal exceptions to that, and we'll get into that if it ever comes up. We don't need to worry about that. And then the last slide. And we can get into this if it ever comes up, but generally if there's a conflict that arises because of your membership in a very large class, and the classic example is you're legislating a land use issue, and you own a home in Creswell, but a lot of other people own homes in Creswell. So you can vote on a land use issue that affects houses in Creswell, because you are one of a class of everyone in Creswell. So even though you are impacted by that decision, you can still participate. So that's the type of thing we're talking about.
What's this membership in the nonprofit? How does that work?
If you are on a board, I think so. If you are making a decision that impacts a nonprofit to which you are associated, usually by board membership, then it's not a conflict.
The city's voting to make a donation to the family relief ministry, and
Yeah.
you're on the ministry.
Yep, yep.
We had a counselor a while back who wanted to declare a conflict based on a non-financial issue and get a moral problem with something. And I recall that was, it's, conflicts of interest can't be anything other than financial. Right?
So, right, yeah, and I have a, I know there are decisions that are tough for you all to make sometimes. But it's, I mean, if you ask me and you want my opinion, I'll tell you. I think you got this job to do it, and I think voting is one of those jobs. I think you're on this council to vote, and I don't like, my personal opinion. I think there are very few circumstances where you would abstain from voting, and that's what we would call that. It's not an ethical issue. It's a personal issue where you don't want to vote, you want to abstain. I think that is, you know, I'll be brutally honest, I think that's not doing your job. I think you're here to do that job.
So clarify one other point too, in regards to an actual conflict of interest. If your vote was required for a quorum, would you not then still be obligated to vote?
Yeah, that's one of the exceptions. If we can't get to an answer without your vote, then we're gonna let you sit there quietly and listen, and not deliberate, but then you're allowed to vote. It's pretty rare.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was on the record and we talked about that.
It's a matter of necessity. So if the city as an entity can't take action without your vote, then we're gonna make you vote.
Okay, very good.
As long as we document, you know,
Correct.
the conflict.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
So the next item on the agenda is the camper